Welcome to the Andrew Brel Substack. Today's post is narrated by Andrew Brel.
Toxic masculinity in the golden Epstein, Kuchner, Trump, pedo era. How did we become the worst child abusers in human history, in God's name? Read by Andrew Brel. The Epstein, Kuchner, Trump, Zionist golden era will always be remembered for the weaponized child abuse, compromising the most influential with evidence of sexual indiscretion, causing them to interfere with the course of American justice, commonly for the purpose of changing laws in ways that transfer astonishing amounts from the US into a military system for purposes that abuse children, completing a cycle of enrichment for the billionaires in which children are the biggest losers. How unusual is the child abusive behavior Jeffrey Epstein and his circle of influential Zionist friends brought into mainstream awareness? How rich does our cultural relationship between toxic masculinity and abuse of minors run? Before you decide whether to listen to the body of information that follows, which is not the shortest piece I've ever read, here's the premise that may or may not be interesting to you. Toxic masculinity is the cultural construct of dominant masculine norms in which red-blooded, libidinous, tough guys willing to make hard, manly decisions glorifying patriarchal racial entitlement make the best leaders. For this reason, we elect our leader class from a limited pool in which toxic masculinity defines the ideology of the age. Elected lawmakers operate a 250-year-old political legal system in which they devise laws intended for the betterment of all along an agreed constitutional format. Seen in isolation, each challenge for lawmakers has specific criteria that measure its success. Take, for example, child welfare. There is a general population, a specific number of children of a specific age. Specific criteria place them at risk. Specific actions process this information. A government office is established to determine the cost of remedy. The data exists showing the cause of the problem affecting a specific number of children and the cost required to effect change. Educated, informed professionals are paid to formulate an initiative that represents the will of the American people to protect children from the risks they face. This would include the sexual attention of unregulated rapists. Congress approves the budget for this office, and the system is seen to be working as the Founding Fathers intended. The most vulnerable Americans, commonly from the poorest 50 percentile who are born at risk, depend on the most powerful adults, the elected leader class, to protect their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Across the wealth divide, we see disparity in access to the law protecting children. At the core of this issue is sex and the law. Should all American children be equally entitled to protection from sex offenses under the same law? Knowing the most common attributes elected lawmakers represent, do we believe toxic masculinity, with its high-value attachment to sex with the young, offers the best choice for lawmakers representing the young at risk from the most toxically masculine? The Epstein network has shown how the richest can enjoy sex with children, acquire financial benefits, and then face no justice beyond more profitability. But the vast majority of child abusers in a culture of endemic child sex offenses is not down to a few rich Zionists in the Epstein Club. The subject is, should we continue allowing a cult of toxic masculinity to normalize rape culture in which we elect lawmakers to spend trillions on abusing babies and children abroad while we allocate very little towards reforming endemic rape culture in the United States? The same lawmakers unable to fund protections for American children have paid countless billions to kill at least 20,000 Palestinian children in Gaza since the United States bombing began, with true figures likely higher due to the thousands of others buried under rubble. Laws that exist to protect children are the responsibility of elected lawmakers. Elected lawmakers decide how much to budget on a legal process protecting children from pedophiles and child abusers that represents the will of the American people. In a representative democracy, you get the lawmakers who represent the will of the people. So what does the data tell us about the will of the people and the laws made by the lawmakers when it comes to child sex abuses and baby murder law? Every society is as strong as the laws that regulate societal behaviors, nowhere more crucially than how we protect children. Compromising Zionist-funded Epstein file hospitality links senior members of government and their billionaire owners to sex with children, enabling a culture of forced compliance, ending laws protecting children from abuse, passing laws that kill children abroad with United States funding. As a result of this interference with the legal process, the United States leader class in both parties represents a disproportionately high number of pedo-rapist baby murderers entitled to pass laws normalizing abuses against children, domestically and internationally, at the discretion of a leader class responsible for the law affecting children's rights. How pervasive is this culture of child sex abuse among U.S. lawmakers? Estimating the numbers of children affected is not as simple as a census. To get an informed idea about how widespread sexual abuse of children is takes some time. I'm presenting only the most recent, most credible reports intended to show the flavor of an issue we know can be 95% eradicated through funded education. In a 2024 report, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, estimates that at least 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 to 20 boys in the United States will experience sexual abuse during childhood. 25% of girls and 0.79% of boys. The gender disparity is interesting because in the culture of toxic masculinity, boys are less likely to report sex abuse. It is highly probable that the numbers of boys raped is significantly higher. Child sexual abuse is often not reported, more often in the case of boys than in girls. Experts in the law say that about 1 in 3 child sex abuse incidents ever come to the attention of child protection or the police. There are approximately 35.3 million girls under the age of 18 in the United States. 25% of that number is around 9 million girls. There are approximately 36.8 million boys under the age of 18 in the United States. 0.79% is around 285,000 boys. Annually, according to child advocacy group the National Children's Alliance, an estimated 532,228 children, unique incidents, were victims of abuse and neglect in the United States in 2024, the most recent year in which there is national data. That's nearly 1 in 100. At a minimum level then, according to CDC numbers, more than 9 million Americans are victims of child sex abuse. If only 1/3 of these crimes against children are reported, the actual number of American children raped by adults may well be above 27 million. Statistics change over time as lawmakers pass bills to fund better education. More than 20% of children are sexually abused before the age of 8, said the Snyder Report in 2000. 1 in 4 girls, almost 25%, is sexually abused before the age of 18, says Dubey et al. In 2005. 1 in 6 boys, 16%, is sexually abused before the age of 18, also from 2005. While it's shocking to imagine so many millions of American children being sexually abused, whatever the actual numbers may be, imagine how many child sex abusers it takes to commit that many offenses. Clearly, there are many child sex abusers who have not been convicted. The odds are that in a representative democracy, there are child sex abusers in government passing laws affecting children in America and children abroad. If it is clear that more funding for better education lowers child abuse numbers, which we know is the truth, why do we elect lawmakers who prefer to fund baby murder abroad rather than improve safety for children at home? Is it related to our cultural reliance on toxic masculinity? A lawmaker class presiding over epidemic pedophile child abusers at home who pass laws that make killing 14-month-old babies live on TV legal and a patriotic duty. Our leader class openly celebrate bombing 12-year-old children in school, who spend countless billions creating the largest baby amputee population in history while transferring billions to their personal enrichment. Bombing babies to clear their land for a Kuchner, Trump, Epstein, Gaza development project, paid for by the US taxpayers who were not consulted on their involvement in mass baby murder, whose Congress was not consulted on the legality of mass murdering children. Eradicating child sex abuse at home and making mass baby murder illegal is easily done by effective legislation. All that would take is the will to do it. There is very little doubt that a well-funded education campaign with the will to end child sex abuse would protect children at risk. It is equally obvious and true that we could end legal mass baby murder with one single law passed in Congress. The reason we have the child sex numbers that we do, and the reason we have the budget to mass murder babies as we do, is because we have lawmakers who pass laws to achieve this outcome. The long-term effects of a culture placing the laws regulating crimes against children in the hands of lawmakers of the kind we see passing laws in 2026 represents a sweeping range of consequences for more than just American society. Child sex abuse affects every American. Child sex abuse doesn't end at the scene of the crime. The long-term effects on the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for a raped child lasts a lifetime. It is in that sense similar to the prospects affecting an amputee baby. The long-term effects of a legal system causing the outcome we see represented in the data will never find a happy outcome. The costs to the society failing children in this way are devastating, economically, ethically, and socially. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse are up to 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. While precise figures for completed suicides vary, studies indicate that up to 30 to 45% of survivors experience suicidal ideation or make at least one suicide attempt in their lifetime. At least 1/3 of people affected in this way as adolescents would rather their abusers had killed them. Many will remain maladjusted and unable to contribute to the society in other ways they would have but for the traumatic interference with their civil rights. Why don't we arrest pedophiles and rapists? Pedophiles contemplating child sex abuse do so knowing the likelihood of facing accountability is low. Pedophiles know their representation among elected lawmakers places above victims of child abuse. Criminal trials for child sexual abuse are rare. Only a fraction of reported cases end up in court in a system that ensures only a fraction of offences that do get reported see consequences that might deter this normalized American cultural rite of masculine passage. Overall, published experts estimate only 10% of reported cases that get as far as being reported end in a conviction. While child sexual abuse can carry serious punishments, including prison and sex offender registration, the vast majority of offenders know they will never face legal consequences when they commit their acts. Child rape is not a uniquely American cultural behavior. There is data on the prevalence of child sex abuses from many countries with which to compare United States data. It is the same with the law on baby murder. We know the data from every legal system in the world. The only other country besides the United States in which mass baby murder is indemnified in law by apartheid statute is Israel. For this reason, merging the Israeli army with the United States for equal access to funding makes practical sense in law, if not so much for babies being abused. In Islamic law, Sharia, which forms the core of every Islamic country's legal system, the penal code treats the intentional killing of any human being, regardless of age, as murder. Anyone who murders a baby by dropping a bomb on them or sniping them, or with a sophisticated drone built to murder babies more efficiently, would expect to be arrested and executed for this death penalty offense under Sharia law. Data on US child rape has one notable difference to reports from many other countries where the incidence of child sex abuse does not affect the poorest disproportionately. While income inequality and poverty rates showed strong associations with physical and psychological abuse and child neglect, among poor people there is no significant relationship between income inequality or poverty rates and sexual abuse. American children from impoverished families are disproportionately affected. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, rates of child abuse and neglect are 5 times higher among children in low socioeconomic households compared to more affluent peers. We see then that money matters most on how the law in America affects children. The richer the child, the lower the likelihood of them being sexually abused. The 1996 Third National Incidence Study of Child Abuse and Neglect, conducted on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Sciences in response to a congressional mandate, found out that compared to children whose families earned $30,000 a year or more, children in families with annual incomes below $15,000 a year were 17 times more likely to be sexually abused. There has been a decrease in reported child sex offences since 1996. Data from the National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System indicates that substantiated child sexual abuse cases have declined by 62% since 1990, largely because better education in schools helps children identify boundaries and report inappropriate behavior earlier. It is a simple transition from the data of how and why child sex abuse occurs to awareness that effective law enforcement by a well-funded court system could stop all child sex abuse very quickly. We continue down this child abuse model by choice, unable to spend even 1% as much as we do bombing babies for Israel on protecting our children from being raped. We could stop mass baby murder by American lawmakers overnight by passing laws that make baby murder illegal and arrest baby murderers under the new law that made baby murder illegal, with appropriate sentencing for all involved in the murder of babies. Arresting all baby murderers would shift the vote in Congress, almost certainly leading to a majority who would divert the money spent bombing babies into education to end our leadership cult of toxic masculinity, entitled to protect the traditional values associated with man's rights under God when it comes to sex with children or even non-consensual sex with women. How effective is rape law in the United States? Sexual violence is common in the United States. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. Nearly 20% to 22% of women have experienced completed or attempted rape in their lifetimes. 172.3 million women times 21% as the average is more than 36 million women. Roughly 1.5% to 3% of men have experienced completed or attempted rape. 171.3 million men, average 2% equals 3.4 million men. An estimated 443,635 people aged 12 and above experience sexual violence each year in the United States, according to RAINN.org, described as the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization and operator of the National Sexual Assault Hotline. When including other forms of contact, sexual violence such as unwanted sexual touch and coercion or pussy grabbing by entitled famous men, that 21% average number rises to nearly half of all women. A strong case for reviewing the role of toxic masculinity as criteria for choosing the leader class. What is the connection between toxic masculinity, rape, and mass baby murder? Toxic masculinity and rape go together like Trump and delusion. Harmful, rigid, masculine norms like entitlement, emotional suppression, and the need for dominance contribute to the broader social environment of a rape culture. Traditional norms that equate manhood with power, aggression, and sexual conquest commonly lead individuals to view women as sexual objects or trophies rather than equals. Studies show that men who believe they are entitled to grab him by the pussy for misogynistic sexual dominance are at a much higher risk of perpetrating assault and ignoring conventional boundaries. This sexual rivalry among toxic males places a higher trophy value on sex with younger women. A culture of "some say he likes them younger than me" places a higher value on the younger the better, youthful conquest. Younger girls are less capable of resistance. Vulnerable youth, unable to fight back, is more appealing to the average red-blooded male who is seldom deterred by toothless law on age of consent. In environments that normalize harmful gender roles, sexual violence is often used as a mechanism to establish male dominance and to punish those who reject sexual advances. In a culture that promotes and normalizes toxic masculinity indemnified in law, there is overwhelming evidence this leads to increased rape numbers across the age spectrum. Government electing representatives by toxic masculinity criteria invites a pervasive culture of sexual misconduct. PBS News reported in March of 2025, 12 dozen lawmakers accused in 8 years. Since 2017, the Associated Press has catalogued at least 147 state lawmakers across 44 states who have been accused of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. There are 535 voting lawmakers in the United States government. 147 is above 27%. Almost 1/3 of US lawmakers have been accused of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct since 2017. Over a third resigned or were expelled from office, and roughly another third faced repercussions, such as losing party or committee leadership positions. A dozen top state executive officials, including governors and attorneys general, also faced sexual misconduct allegations during that time, and most resigned. In July 2026, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced an initiative requiring annual testosterone screening for serving military, 30 and older, offering hormone replacement therapy, TRT, to those with deficiencies. Soon after, Fox News host Jesse Watters joked that women on military bases and during port calls better watch out and be careful of male troops acting like wild animals because of the Pentagon's new testosterone testing and treatment plan. For context, the government now legislates to chemically increase the libido of men already entitled in law to rape and pillage as a part of the soldierly contract. A news broadcaster jokes about the increase in rapes that will follow. Rape is not only normalized, improving one's rapist credentials has become a patriotic obligation. Thank you for your service as a rapist. Are soldiers commonly indemnified from rape accountability? The short answer is that rape as a weapon of war is common and always has been. Here are just a few of the best-known examples. The Barbarossa Decree in 1941 was issued shortly before the invasion of the Soviet Union. It stipulated that normal criminal offenses committed by German soldiers against Soviet civilians would not be prosecuted. Soldiers were given immunity for crimes against civilians, including sexual violence, unless it was deemed a threat to military discipline. German soldiers raped Russians at every opportunity. As a result, the Red Army raped Germans in revenge, as many as 2 million rapes reported when they got to Berlin in 1945. Not one Red Army rapist was ever prosecuted for rape. With hindsight, the German tactic of raping to suppress the Russian population instead motivated them to resist. Rape and pillage privileges have been a constant recruitment incentive among occupation forces since the Ottoman era. Throughout major global conflicts, United States troops have been no different in following this effective military recruitment incentivizing tradition. U.S. servicemen have enjoyed indemnified rape privileges against local populations. Following the D-Day landings, the sociologist J. Robert Lilly of Northern Kentucky University estimates that 4,500 instances of sexual assault were committed by condom-carrying U.S. servicemen arriving in France from June 1944 to the end of the war in May 1945, during the rape liberation of France. Mass sexual violence was documented during the post-war occupation of Japan and Okinawa. Although Japanese reports of rape were largely ignored at the time, as many as 10,000 Okinawan women may have been raped, according to a credible estimate from one Okinawan historian. It has been claimed that the rape was so prevalent that most Okinawans over age 65 around the year 2000 either knew or had heard of a woman who was raped in the aftermath of the war. US military officials stated in 2000 that there is no evidence of mass rapes. No rapist was even investigated, let alone prosecuted. Ignoring reports of rape by US servicemen is how the US military historically indemnifies serving military. During the 1968 My Lai massacre, at least 20 Vietnamese women and girls were systematically raped and tortured by American soldiers. Children as young as 12 were gang raped and their bodies mutilated. After years of denial and distraction by the military, led by propagandist Kissinger, 3 years later, a single US Army rapist murderer was jailed for the My Lai massacre. US Army Lieutenant William Kelly Jr. was convicted of murdering 22 villagers on March 29, 1971, about 3 years after the March 16, 1968, My Lai massacre. Bill served 3 days in a military stockade before direct intervention by President Richard Nixon freed him. His sentence was commuted to house arrest at his quarters, where he spent 3 years watching TV at home before being paroled on November 19, 1974, having served just over 3 years of home leave. 3 days in jail for the rape murder of a 12-year-old child, and others. Lieutenant William Kelly Jr. was the only person jailed for the 1968 My Lai massacre because higher-ranking officers were acquitted or had charges dropped. Juries and military prosecutors focused blame on a single individual rather than systemic command policies in which hundreds were guilty of gang rape murder of children as young as 12. With hindsight, the American tactic of raping to suppress the Vietnamese resistance backfired. In 2006, 4 US Army soldiers perpetrated the Mahmoudiya rape and murders in Iraq, which involved the gang rape and murder of 14-year-old Iraqi girl Abia Qasim Hamza al-Janabi and the murder of her family in their home on March 12, 2006, including her little sister Hadil, who was 6 years old. For months, the US military tried to cover up the rape murder of a 14-year-old and her family, threatening Justin Watt, the army whistleblower who finally succeeded in having the rapist soldiers prosecuted, despite receiving death threats. Stephen Dale Green, 19 at the time, was identified as the ringleader and triggerman. Green was tried in a U.S. civilian federal court and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Green was the only one of the 4 men convicted in connection with the rape and murders to serve time in civilian prison. He died by suicide in his cell in United States Penitentiary, Tucson, Arizona, in February 2014, aged 28. Paul E. Cortez, 24, was sentenced to 100 years in a military prison. Cortez was convicted of conspiracy to rape, committing rape, 4 counts of murder, and other charges. Under military law, he'll be eligible for parole in 10 years. By pleading guilty, he avoided the death penalty. Cortez said the soldiers tried to cover up their crimes by burning the girl's body and their own clothes and throwing the murder weapon, an AK-47, into a canal. Cortez wept as he apologized for his role in the rape and killings. He broke down in tears while recounting events on the day of the attack, saying he held the girl down and acted as a lookout while others took turns raping her. He told the judge he could not explain why he took part. A psychologist testified that Cortez and the others likely suffered stress brought on by fatigue and trauma. The herd bloodlust that accompanies sexually frustrated toxic masculinity when the enemy is dehumanized. U.S. Army Specialist James P. Barker, 23, was sentenced to 90 years in a military prison. Under the plea agreement, Barker got a life sentence but will not serve more than 90 years in military prison. He will be eligible for parole in 20 years. "I do not ask anyone to forgive me today," he tearfully told the judge. "I don't know how that would be possible after what I have done." Barker showed no reaction when the sentence was read. Afterwards, he smoked a cigarette outside as a bailiff watched over him. He grinned but said nothing as reporters passed by. Barker remains incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. Jesse Spielman, 22, was convicted and originally sentenced to 110 years in military prison. Private First Class Spielman's response when hearing of a plan to rape 14-year-old Abir Qasim Hamza al-Janabi was, "I'm down with that." Spielman was sentenced for her rape and murder and the murder of her mother Fikiria, father Qasim, and little sister Hadil, who was 6 years old. Private First Class Brian Howard, 19, also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct justice by lying to his superior officers about the March 12, 2006 rape murder. Howard apologized in the military court in Fort Campbell, Kansas, for his actions. He said he regretted not taking action to stop the killings and not telling the truth. Howard was sentenced to 27 months in a military prison at Fort Campbell in Kentucky in March 2007 for his role as an accessory and conspiring to obstruct justice. Having served roughly 17 months of his 27-month sentence, he is no longer incarcerated. On this occasion, in 2006, 4 U.S. Army rapist murderers were sentenced to lengthy jail terms, signaling a shift in assured immunity for rapes by U.S. military. U.S. Army personnel committed other severe sexual abuses, torture, and war crimes against detainees in Iraq, primarily between 2003 and 2006. Systemic abuses were used as a deliberate military intelligence strategy to humiliate prisoners and soften them up for military interrogations. This includes the events at Abu Ghraib prison, where U.S. Army military personnel and civilian contractors perpetrated widespread sexual humiliation, leading to some prison sentences where, once again, none of the officials who ordered the sexual abuse were charged. No intelligence officers or commissioned officers issuing orders served prison time for the Abu Ghraib abuses. All of the personnel who were convicted and incarcerated were lower-level enlisted soldiers and non-commissioned officers who were following orders. The 11 United States soldiers court-martialed and convicted were low-ranking, low-income individuals who served military prison time for following orders. Specialist Charles Grainer Jr., sentenced to 10 years for assault, battery, and maltreatment, served over 6.5 years. Staff Sergeant Ivan Chip Frederick was sentenced to 8 years for abuse and humiliation, and he served about 3 years. Private First Class Lindy England was sentenced to 3 years and served over 1 year. When women were allowed into the U.S. Army, they were abused at a higher rate than in the civilian population. Approximately the same ratio that toxic masculinity exists in military culture as opposed to the general population. On average, over the course of the war in Afghanistan, 24% of active duty women and 1.9% of active duty men experienced sexual assault. The report highlights how experiences of gender inequality are most pronounced for women of color who experience intersecting forms of racism and sexism. Independent data also confirm queer and trans service members disproportionately greater risk for sexual assault. No wonder Pete Hegseth wants to boost the rapist, racist right's libido. A horny rapist soldier is far more effective in the field than a rational, calm professional considering whether murdering babies might be illegal. What young rapist looking to rape legally wouldn't be tempted to join the Hegseth army? Who are the abusers and what percentage are elected lawmakers? Each of those abused boys and girls in the United States had an abuser. The USCC.gov reports the numbers. In 2021, 57,287 child abuse cases were reported. 1,062 involved sexual abuse. On average, each year, according to the government website, around 1,000 people are convicted of child sex offenses. From 2009 to 2013, Child Protective Services agencies substantiated or found strong evidence to indicate that 63,000 children a year were victims of sexual abuse. Every 9 minutes, an American child is raped by lawmakers who ensure the law provides for an interval of 9 minutes before the next American child can be raped, with 98.5% of offenders knowing they will face no accountability. 1,000 convictions for 63,000 child sex offenses works out at about 1.5%. The top 5 districts for sexual abuse offenders in 2021 were the Northern District of Texas with 48, the Middle District of Florida with 43, the District of Arizona with 33, the District of South Dakota with 32, and the Central District of Illinois with 27. 99.5% of the average 1,000 sexual abuse offenders charged annually were sentenced to prison. Their average sentence was 211 months. The average sentence for offenders convicted for producing child pornography was 277 months. In round numbers, that is, at a minimum, 63,000 American children being raped annually. If 1 in 3 is the number of cases reported, then the actual number of raped children would be much higher. If only 1,000 are convicted, where are the other 99.5% of child rapists? How many of those hold positions as lawmakers, writing laws in which they legislate to spend hundreds of billions killing babies abroad, rather than spending what it costs to eradicate the culture of toxic masculinity, entitling adults to rape children with assured legal immunity to a 98.5% probability. 93.6% of sexual abuse offenders were men, says the 2021 Government Sentencing Commission. In a culture of toxic masculinity, fame remains an indemnifier for rape. When you're famous, they let you do it. This culture of child rape affecting so many Americans takes place under rule of law made by elected lawmakers in a representative democracy where we know a great many lawmakers are statistically likely to be child sex abusers. So how big a deal is historic child sex abuse in the election of lawmakers making laws for the United States of America? Why would any voter elect a rapist or a child sex offender? Almost 1 in 3 elected lawmakers have compromised backgrounds in a government led by a convicted rapist with a string of child sex accusations an Epstein mile long. A billionaire elected to make billions for his family by spending US money murdering children. It seems likely that lawmakers compromised by historic child sex offenses, which may be used against them in a form of career-defining blackmail, would be more willing to vote to spend trillions on US policy funding endless wars, killing and maiming children, than lawmakers who are not linked to child sex abuse. There is a sexual component in this leader-class structure of Christianized toxic masculinity that invites consideration for how we ignore our cultural attachment to child sex abuse as some form of American entitlement that cannot and must not be mentioned while we elect leaders from the Epstein class toxic masculinity cult. In July of 2026, Judge Lewis E. Kaplan forced President Trump to pay $5.8 million to rape victim E. Jean Carroll. The jury found Trump attacked Carroll in 1996 in the dressing room of a luxury Manhattan department store and then defamed her after she described it publicly in a 2019 memoir. Trump denied it was rape because she's not my type. Legally, rape is generally defined as non-consensual sexual penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina, anus, or oral penetration by a sex organ. Acts are considered non-consensual if they occur by force, threats, or if the victim is incapacitated. Rape is rape when the judge rules it is rape. The "she is not my type" defense has not convinced anybody that the president is not a convicted rapist whose rape offenses do not end with one New York ruling. A woman who claimed she was sexually assaulted by tattooed crusader Pete Hegseth told police in 2017 she remembered Pete Hegseth preventing her from leaving a hotel room and that he was on top of her. The woman recounted her hazy memories of the encounter, but told police she said no a lot and that Hegseth swiped away her phone and blocked the door with his body, according to documents from the Monterey Police Department. Hegseth and his attorneys have denied the 2017 rape claim was rape. Multiple outlets reported Hegseth paid a financial settlement as a result of the case. After that payment, Hegseth's attorney said, "Mr. Hegseth is completely innocent." Ordinarily, I would think the issue of child sex offences or even any rape offences would be a disqualifier from high office, presenting child sex offenders or even rapists from writing laws indemnifying themselves and their child sex abusing colleagues from prosecution. In this way, normalizing child sex abuse at home at the same time as passing laws to abuse children abroad in the worst ways imaginable. Is blowing up babies and creating child amputees with 2,000-pound evaporator bombs child abuse? Legally, child abuse is defined by the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act as any recent act or failure to act by a parent or caretaker that results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act that presents an imminent risk of serious harm. Would a 2,000-pound bomb dropping on a tent filled with children present an imminent risk of serious harm? The military tactic of creating child amputees for the value this has in defeating a resilient enemy's morale is widely known, but would causing children to have limbs amputated present an imminent risk of serious harm, making it an offence under child abuse law. Of course, when it's white children at home, then baby murder is baby murder, and that's illegal. But the beauty of racist apartheid law is that it dehumanizes the babies, removing them from the protection of human laws, entitling the United States administration to claim sovereign rights to apply apartheid law in which killing babies and children is legal. Who in their right mind would interpret international law, and particularly the laws of the Geneva Conventions, in a way that allows babies and children to be targeted by military for abuse? The rules of war apply to combatants under specific conditions. A baby can never meet the low bar of a combatant. Under Geneva Conventions, the US abuse of babies in Gaza is not legal. It is in every one of the tens of thousands of dead and maimed children, child abuse rising to the level of premeditated baby murder. War crimes in this category are prosecuted primarily by national courts, with the Hague-based International Criminal Court, the ICC, acting as an independent global court of last resort. The ICC prosecutes individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression if domestic legal systems are unable or unwilling to do so. The United States is not a signatory to the ICC. While the US signed the 1998 Rome Statute, the treaty establishing the ICC, the treaty was never submitted to the Senate for ratification. In 2002, Congress specifically passed the American Service Members Protection Act to explicitly shield United States personnel from ICC jurisdiction and limit United States cooperation with the court. This fundamental rejection has often resulted in direct diplomatic friction and punitive measures between Washington and the court in The Hague, in which baby murder is not illegal under United States law that reserves its sovereign right to continue baby murder policy for its strategic value in war that is not criminal under US law, even if it is a war crime under ICC jurisdiction. Because the United States courts are not prosecuting child abusers, rapists, or baby murderers under US laws, it falls to the ICC to represent the victims of US baby murder policy. In July 2026, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced a sweeping campaign to dismantle the threat posed by the International Criminal Court to United States sovereignty, enabling ongoing mass baby murder entitlement as an inalienable American sovereign right indemnified in perpetuity. The campaign will feature a whole-of-government response to systematically disable the ICC's ability to operate, target American servicemen or officials, or otherwise threaten American sovereignty. The ICC poses an intolerable threat to US sovereignty. It claims the authority to prosecute and even imprison American servicemen and officials operating on behalf of America's national interest. Americans never signed up for this, and all American presidents since the ICC's ratification have maintained that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over Americans. The ICC previously opened an investigation into US servicemen and intelligence officers and has since refused to close these cases. The ICC now seeks to become the unaccountable global arbiter, positioning itself above and beyond the nation-state as a supernatural enforcement arm of a globalist bureaucracy empowered to persecute American servicemen and officials at will. No diplomatic option will be off limits in the campaign to dismantle the threat posed by the ICC to Americans. The Trump administration's war on the ICC will feature a wide range of actions intended to ensure that the International Criminal Court is incapable of threatening U.S. sovereignty or targeting Americans, says Marco Rubio. The U.S. government know the letter of the law protecting children from abuse, rape, and even baby murder in both international law and domestic constitutional law. With U.S. law powerless to prevent the ongoing rape of American children in this culture of indemnified toxic masculinity, the leader-class administration, the Trump-Kuchner Epstein gang, continue a status quo in which the numbers of children abused will increase. Why wouldn't they when child abusers are indemnified by law at home and paid child abusers indemnified for crimes against children abroad? If you need to explain why mass murdering babies is illegal in international law, then you can never convince a baby murderer that premeditated baby murder is un-American. Patriotism and the rule of constitutional law. Can you be a patriot and not obey the law? Abusing children in the ways we see reported daily is illegal under international law, whether Marco Rubio is able to end international law or not. Baby murder is only ever illegal. Going to war with the ICC to prove that the US has the sovereign right to murder babies legally serves no useful purpose beyond confirming the United States government act with awareness and premeditation in defense of their intention to continue mass murdering babies with ongoing immunity. This is what represents we the people entitled to mass murder as many babies as we choose legally, who can have sex with as many American children as we choose, at around one child raped every 9 minutes by child rapists who know that 98.5% of child rapists will not face accountability. It's not just the president who wants the Epstein files erased from memory. In US law, failure to report crimes against children follows prosecution under misprision of felony law. Whoever having knowledge of the actual commission of a felony cognizable by a court in the United States conceals and does not as soon as possible make known the same to some judge or other person in civil or military authority under the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Awareness of crimes against children requires the reporting of abusers. If you believe that dropping bombs on children and babies might present an imminent risk of serious harm, then you have a duty in law. In US law, if you know or suspect serious offenses against children are occurring, you are required in law to report it. Under US law, ordinary private citizens generally have no universal legal duty to report a crime or a conspiracy. However, this is subject to important exceptions. Specific states mandate that witnesses report severe violent crimes against young people. Designated professionals face strict reporting duties, and federal law penalizes active concealment under misprision statute. Anyone who actively assists the conspirators or takes affirmative steps to cover up the plot can be prosecuted as an accomplice or for misprision of felony. Federal law and misprision of felony. At the federal level, the law governing the concealment of crimes is a misprision of a felony, 18 U.S.C. number 4. While the average citizen has no general legal duty to report offences against children, certain individuals have a strict legal obligation. These mandatory reporters typically include professionals like child therapists, psychologists, doctors, lawyers, and teachers who have a legal and ethical duty to warn of imminent danger or report suspected abuse. Law enforcement officers are mandated to report crimes they witness or are made aware of in an official capacity. If, for example, a law enforcement officer knows a U.S. company is manufacturing a device to murder babies, that is conspiracy to commit mass baby murder. Every law enforcement officer has the legal duty to report this crime. For example, Albert Systems manufacture a sniper drone called the Bird of Prey. That is a stable sniper drone with loitering capability and stealth mode, enabling it to target babies before the mothers can use their bodies as human shields. A device manufactured to bring harm to children. The Bird of Prey is an armed drone-mounted weapons system jointly developed through a partnership between Duke Robotics, a US-based company headquartered in Florida, and Albert Systems, the largest manufacturer of genocide tech in history. Duke Robotics, the American arm, is an Israeli company operating in the United States. Its co-founder, Yarif Alroy, is an Israeli national with a team of Israelis, including Yiftach Kleinman and Yosef Baluk, a retired Israeli Navy colonel who served the IGF for 25 years and who has served as a corporate executive, including as CEO and president of Duke Robotics Corporation. Albert Systems has an estimated market cap of $35.36 billion US. The company maintains a record high order backlog of over $30 billion, and it generated $2.9 billion in revenue for the first quarter of 2026. Value is supported by new deals such as the $370 million US border protection contract. Israel's largest private arms manufacturer is the leading supplier of military equipment and digital targeting systems developed and used in Gaza's war crimes and genocide. No company in history has made more weapons specifically for baby murder. At the parent company level, the largest controlling shareholder is the Federman family through their holding company, Federman Enterprises, which owns roughly 42% of Albert Systems. Michael Federman, the founder of Albert, has an estimated net worth of $10.6 billion, according to Bloomberg's Billionaire Index. Baby murder pays big. If you want to murder babies legally, then Duke Robotics' Albert partnership provides Americans with most advanced baby murder system ever developed, with proven battlefield provenance from the Palestine laboratory. It is legal under US law to buy a bird of prey, travel to Palestine, and use the advanced GPS system to locate a new birth. Then fly your bird of prey to the new mother's tent in stealth mode so she doesn't hear you coming, and try shield the baby. The bird of prey is 99% accurate at up to 50 meters. While reporting a conspiracy to murder babies is generally not legally mandated for ordinary individuals, joining the conspiracy in which you knew criminality was occurring and aided and abetted ongoing criminality by not reporting conspiracy to murder babies is a severe crime. Both federal and state authorities treat conspiracy to commit baby murder in the United States as a major felony, which carries penalties of life imprisonment. Let's consider whether our government's role in creating the world's largest child amputee population, alongside the abundance of videos showing mutilated babies affected by US child abuse policy, is in fact illegal, as the ICC say, as well as under constitutional law. I think the overwhelming probability is that sending deadly ordnance to maim and evaporate countless thousands of defenseless babies is illegal in every jurisdiction applying legal precedent. Baby murder under constitutional law has always been illegal. It is still illegal to this day, even when American corporate investors generate hundreds of billions in profits by investing in genocide tech developed in the Palestine laboratory. Why would the majority of Americans who identify as patriots not obey the law and report child abusers to the authorities? For that matter, why would any patriot not consider whether the founding fathers would have agreed to rule by an administration of this type when they prepared the US Constitution to weather the storm of corrupt government by violent liars? According to Article 3, Section 3, treason against the United States consists of waging war against the country or helping its enemies by giving them aid and comfort. I can't imagine constitutional law allows a leader to pay gunmen to shoot citizens in the face for $1 million payday legally. I think it's more likely that the epidemic of child abuse and disenfranchisement of a poorer class by an entitled billionaire class is evidence of corruption that, when paired with the baby murder and the systemic enabling of child sex abuse by interfering with the course of justice, infers a terminal illegitimacy on the government of toxic masculinity. All of which presupposes that citizens do their duty knowing what that duty is. In the chaos created by the chaos administration of Christians for Jesus, it's easy to see how confusing the world has become for a vast majority who just want peace and love as an entitlement for faith. The confusion arises from the law. Is baby murder legal? If child abuse is happening and it was your job as a leader lawmaker to stop, but you chose instead to spend that budget not addressing the child abuse problem, then is that corrupt government? Could a different kind of leader, perhaps one not associated with toxic masculinity or historic sex offenses against children, provide a less corrupt alternative to make America law-abiding again? It seems obvious to me, but to the majority it is not, for reasons that are obvious now as they will be in a court of international law. A Nuremberg II examination of how legal mass baby murder is. Considering how implausible it would be in any court of law to claim, "I didn't know any babies were being harmed," we then have to consider the cultural pathology of a population so unwilling to face their national identity that they look away from the law requiring them to not look away. What is the cultural pathology in which so many remain unwilling to speak up against mass baby murder genocide, just because the genocidal force says it is not genocide? Who are you going to believe? President Trump's Truth Social, or your lying eyes showing you tens of thousands of mutilated baby bodies? Cultural pathology in a population refers to the distortion of a society's social, moral, or psychological norms, typically driven by unequal power dynamics transferring wealth upwards to a small minority, systemic trauma, or toxic institutional systems eroding civil rights. It manifests as a collective, maladaptive set of behaviors, corruption of established legal statutes, widespread alienation in which patriotism is racism, and generational trauma in which targeting children for amputation and telling the obedient followers it's legal because Jesus said so presents a new low bar for American entitlement. The cultural pathology of the nation's typical child sex abuser is widely reported, mostly by the abused themselves, but not widely understood by the majority in a culture actively abusing more than 25% of its women. Every 68 seconds an American is sexually assaulted in a culture trained to ignore this reality. That is the same reason this practice will continue. White men in a leader class defined by toxic masculinity will not voluntarily surrender their entitlement to continue the methodology that has brought us to this place in 2026. They have made this behavior normal with a great deal of work. They will not voluntarily surrender the fruits of their diligent labor. On any given day in a normal conversation, the majority of people would not ordinarily sanction their government's use of strategic child abuse to win a war against an enemy that includes evaporating infants under the age of 1. Most Americans will tell you they believe child abuse is wrong in every form, be it child rape affecting more than 25% of American girls, or the targeting of babies and children for the strategic value that represents for a government willing to target babies and children as a legitimate military tactic under international law. Under the assumption that some Americans identify as being against legitimized child abuse, why do the majority of Americans elect known child abusers into the highest office and then ignore the horrific child abuses those elected officials carry out in their name? How can you have a beautiful day when you know what the government is doing in your name? In the book I wrote about this subject, my efforts to address this curious ability to erase culpability for child abuse that is now normal US policy supported by an average of 40% of approval Americans to this day, took the form of moral turpitude. Moral turpitude, the decaying ethical backbone of a culture where 25% of their girls are being raped, who choose a convicted rapist fraud to run a monetized child abuse scheme that has seen the US military fund the creation of the largest child amputee population in history, indemnified by the sovereign right to kill babies free from any legal oversight. Under existing law, Americans can travel abroad for child hunting sport in Gaza, brag about how many children they sniped on social media, then return to their American identities, indemnified from any accountability normally associated with child abuse of this kind. A racist identity in which it's not child murder because it's not a white American child being hunted for sport. It's a racist nationalist entitlement. We have a leader able to brag about his big, beautiful double tap on February the 28th. First, his team whacked 14-month-old baby Zara, then triple tapped a school with over 100 children killed. In one single day of targeting and killing babies and children with premeditation and deliberation, President Trump proved killing babies and children is normal, legitimate U.S. strategy, approved of by 40% of Americans, defined by this legacy. In the matter of moral turpitude, who is better? The leader who kills babies and children for his own monetary benefit, or the people who see horrific child abuse unfolding and choose to ignore the law requiring they act like responsible citizens to obey the law? The rise and rise of American moral turpitude has its genesis in a 3R education. We learn a curriculum formulated by the racist religious right to teach the values of a racist religious right, in which each successive generation sees the freedoms won by the blood of resistance fighters more than 250 years ago eroded into the cult of indemnified mass baby murderers, transferring the nation's wealth from the poor huddled masses to a small huddled handful of billionaires whose special skill is monetizing mass baby murder to achieve a level of excess that has become impossibly, unsustainably disproportionate. If you follow the money, how did normalizing child abuse by toxic masculinity work out for the rich? Today, the wealthiest 1% of America owns more corporate equities and mutual funds than the bottom 90% combined, leaving the top 1% with a higher total value than the 90% put together. Federal Reserve data shows that the wealth of three top individuals, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, and Mark Zuckerberg, roughly equals or exceeds the bottom 50% of American households, about 165 million people. But wait, it gets better. Elon Musk's net worth of over $800 billion exceeds the combined wealth of the bottom 50 to 53% of American households. Meanwhile, the bottom 30% of Americans hold a cumulative net worth that is in overall negative debt, as their collective debts generally equal or exceed their total assets. 30% of the US population generally refers to around 100 million people. If you have a net worth of over $1,000, you are wealthier than the bottom 100 million Americans. 1/3 of this great nation remain entirely disenfranchised from life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, almost all born into generational legacy poverty from which their children will never escape. The inheritors of the slave legacy watching their government spend $1 billion a day mass murdering children abroad. In the Trump, Kuchner, Epstein golden era of Zionist billionaire monetized genocide, they, the billionaires, see their wealth soar while the bottom 30% of Americans own a negative net worth as a group. One man owns more than the poorest half of Americans, entitling him to run the government at will. The poorest half of America are so poor they can't afford to mention that baby murder might be illegal, and they believe voting will change everything. The American dream, manufactured by the rich to keep the poor silent. How endemic is pedophilia and child sex abuse? Today I read Tulsi Gabbard's older brother, Bharati Bhakti Gabbard, was arrested and charged with second-degree custodial interference after police said he allegedly tried to lure children into his hotel room in Waikiki. According to the Honolulu Police Department, the incident occurred on Sunday, July 12, 2026, at a hotel pool. Authorities stated that Gabbard approached several children, offered them money and gum, asked for their names, and invited them to his hotel room. The children reported Gabbard and the police were called. The suspect's father, State Democrat Party Senator Mike Gabbard, stated his son was on a drug binge and was admitted to a hospital for a psychiatric evaluation following the incident. My first thought after seeing this alleged pedo family connection was, is that how they got Tulsi Gabbard to join the toxic masculinity cult of the Epstein, Kuchner, Trump golden era of indemnified mass baby murder? She had previously seemed like a sensible person with leadership skills and a regard for the law, not on board with the mass baby murder regime. It does seem strange how everything Trump touches turns to pedophilia, child abuse, and baby murder along a white supremacist, racist funnel of wealth from the poorest to the richest Zionists. What is it about this two-party government so openly committing mass child murder, still able to command such an enormous approval rating? 2 out of 3 Americans voted for this type of government, even as they were wading knee-deep in children's blood, sending countless billions for the express purpose of creating child amputees and dead babies. Yes, I think I'll vote for that, said 2 out of 3 Americans, so aware of domestic and international law on baby murder, they elected not to waste their vote on anything less. The bonus track as we get to the end. That could have been the end, but instead, here's the bonus track. As a bonus track to this post about our curious cultural relationship with child abuse, baby murder, racist patriotism, and white entitlement to wealth, I did a quick Google search. How many elected leaders in the two parties are convicted child sex offenders? We, that is, the we from we the people, us, we, remain silent about our government mass murdering babies and children by the hundreds of thousands in endless, costly grift wars legislated by sex-offending, toxic male lawmakers at our peril. Unless we review the way we look at an entitled culture of toxic masculinity by religious racists as their only choice for a Zionist government exploiting this cultural weakness for abusing children in pursuit of obscene wealth as an American entitlement, the predictable outcome will assuredly follow. You tolerated this, now your children will be next. The sex abuse of children at home and the violent, deadly abuses of babies and children abroad speaks to a culture in need of reform. A big, beautiful, terrific reformation in which we return to rule of law, ending rule by Zionist law. Before you read my bonus track short list of leaders who abuse children and babies at home, before writing laws to abuse children abroad, please consider that this list took me about 2 hours with an internet connection. This is not top secret information. If you deep dive into the leader-class relationship with pedophilia and child abuse, there is an unmissable odor of toxic masculinity. A culture that places a high value on sex with young girls. Some say he likes them younger than me, defines us in a way that cannot be allowed to continue. Children deserve protection from the people writing the laws to protect children from being protected, at home and abroad. Baby murder is wrong. Abusing children is wrong. Rape is a serious offense. No rapist should be allowed to represent high office. Genocide is a crime against humanity. Trying to genocide the ICC for your right to genocide with impunity is an admission of guilt. On the Substack page, I've linked to various sites, including gov.track.us, which is called Tracking Congress and the White House, the Legislator Misconduct Database, which is a page listing 509 instances of alleged and actual misconduct by legislators in the United States Congress. You can read that, and you can also read my own list of about 50 names, which you will know, which are just horrific. I had no idea when I started compiling this list that it was so obvious how many of our elected legislators are pedophiles and just disgusting people. So that's it. You can read that list on Andrew Brel's Substack, and this has been the longest single take reading I've ever done. If you managed to listen this far, well done, and I hope to see you again some other time. Thanks, bye.
One day we'll look back and many will wonder who did what, when, who went where, who asked why, who sent the bombs, who pulled the trigger, who sucked at the teat while those babies just died. The settlers of Zion, backed hard by the crown, rained sorrow on hospitals, churches and schools, taught premature babies never to talk, while Zionist leaders trained Christians like fools. Zionist leaders of Christians made fools. When nothing makes sense on that slippery slope at the bottom of Pandora's box, there is hope. Small consolation, it helps me cope. Something better than nothing. 4 letters, hope. Who will remember who dropped the most bombs? Who stood down all justice to kill without pause? Who parted with laughter to idiot songs, while Zionist killers took Congress applause? When lines of dead children lay shrouded in white, when millions were starved while their God looked away, who spoke up the loudest, who turned down the light? Christian Zionists with nothing to say. Christian Zionists just give thanks and pray. When nothing makes sense on that slippery slope at the bottom of Pandora's box, there is hope. Small consolation, it helps me cope. Something better than nothing. 4 letters, hope. Their war against children that never will end. Kill for love of money, no more and no less. No killer of children can be a true friend to any but those who can never confess. To live in denial, ignore what they see. Believe in forgiveness can follow what's done. A future indemnified from history, where killers of children will always be scum. Killers of children have nowhere to run. When nothing makes sense on that slippery slope at the bottom of Pandora's box, there is hope. Small consolation, it helps me cope. Something better than nothing. 4 letters, hope. Maybe one day empathy will matter more than the right to be wrong. Maybe right after the last child is dead, we'll look back and wonder what took us this long. Small consolation, it helps me cope. At the bottom of Pandora's box, there is hope. Small consolation, it helps me cope. Something better than nothing. 4 letters, hope. may be better than nothing. Four letters hope.